What's up, everyone? This is Jack. Many of you know me as Black Bear Crypto. Today is the start of what we aim to be a weekly podcast series. It's going to be pretty short form, usually between 30 minutes to an hour. We're planning on having guests on from all around the crypto community. Our first guest today is David Foley, a friend of mine and a business partner. He's the CEO of DeFi Strategies, the company where I serve as Chief Technology Officer. We're pretty small fish, but are growing rapidly. Last year, we closed around 1.4 million in assets under management. But we've come a long way, and David's really been at the forefront of this all. So just jumping right into it, David, where did your crypto journey begin, and where is it at today?
Yeah, so my crypto journey began in May 2017. I was doing an internship in finance, and I was kind of doing some analysis on kind of market trends, and I just hadn't really seen much of a change in kind of how the economy functioned since 2008. And so I figured it was a time for me to reevaluate my investment strategy. So I actually ended up liquidating my entire equities portfolio, um, and putting it into Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I haven't looked back since.
So when exactly was this when you made the decision to liquidate your stocks and put it all into cryptocurrency? Like what month and year? It was around 2017, right?
Yeah, so I made my first Bitcoin purchase in May of 2017, and then I ended liquidating my portfolio in like early July, maybe around July, yeah, like maybe the middle of July, I'd say, of 2017.
And what was the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum when you first bought it?
So Bitcoin was 2,200 and Ethereum was 200 when I started.
And have you sold
Oh, and
any of that original Bitcoin and Ethereum that you purchased back then? You sell any of it?
I didn't, but yeah, for a while I was kind of unsure of Ethereum because for like a period of like 3 years it was basically $200. It didn't
Hmm.
like move. So I mean, we've seen a lot of growth,
Hmm.
um, kind of over the last 12 to 18 months. So it's
Now,
nice to see that it's beginning to be appreciated.
now for the audience who doesn't know, David and I met each other back in college when we were going to Loyola University, Maryland together. And I remember going to your dorm room back then in like 2017, 2018, and you had a laptop set up with like an external power supply and all these eGPUs set up, and you were mining Bitcoin back then. And I didn't know what you were doing, but you were really ahead of the game back then. Um, and I know we talked about you didn't make a ton of profit off. You probably broke even on that Bitcoin miner initially, right?
Also, I had it was an 11 card GPU setup. It was mostly 1080 Ti's with some like 1080s and maybe some 1070s.
Hmm.
I would say most of them were probably water cooled, which allowed me to get higher memory overclocks,
Hmm.
um, with the same like power consumption.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so it would get up to like 120, 130 degrees in that second bedroom that I used to run it out of.
Hmm.
Um,
Like 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, the
yeah,
1080 Ti's they're pretty they run pretty hot, don't they?
yeah. So, well, it's also 11 GPUs, two power supplies, like 2,800 watts, or maybe it wasn't that much. It was, I don't know how many watts it was. Um, but yeah, it would get really hot in there. I think I probably made like, I don't know, I was able to sell the GPUs like at the same price that I bought them for.
Hmm.
I would say I probably mined for like maybe a year or so, and
And
then I kind of retired it.
do you remember what you
Yeah.
sold those 1080 Ti's for? Because the price has just gotten so inflated these days. I mean, you probably bought and sold those for like maybe what 200, $300 a pop, if that.
Oh no, I sold them all for $800.
You sold them for 800. Okay, so you definitely turned a profit on that, but really the majority of the gains it wasn't purely based on crypto mining. It was based on holding the Bitcoin and Ethereum that you purchased back at that time, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't make any profit on the GPUs themselves. But basically, I kind of bought the GPUs before the craze kind of like started,
Hmm.
and then I sold them like I didn't sell them all at once. I kind of sold them little by little,
Hmm.
just because like when I made the move from 8 to 11 cards, um, and like the second PSU, it started to become like a lot to manage, like the uptime,
Hmm.
to get like the two power supplies to like talk to each other properly. Like I don't
Yeah,
think
that's a challenge.
like you're not really supposed to, or like these systems like these like Windows, because I
Hmm.
was running it on Windows. Like I didn't really mess with Linux,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. What software were you
Um,
using? Was it like Night? I don't think NiceHash was available back then, right?
no, I would just use
Ethermine, gotcha,
Etherminer,
gotcha.
and then I tried like dual mining because you could like you still can obviously you can like because Ethereum is memory intensive,
Hmm.
so then you could like potentially mine what were they? There were four that people would mine. Siacoin was one of them that's
Hmm.
still around.
Hmm.
But there were like three other coins that you could mine on the CPU, so you could like dual mine, for a little bit of extra like income. It
Hmm.
wasn't much, but it was like something.
Hmm.
Um,
And that was all on dorm room electric, right? So you weren't actually like paying for the additional electric costs.
no, I was. So I
Oh,
was
okay.
I lived off campus senior year, but the electric rate actually. So in Baltimore, the electric rate there was actually the lowest that I've had. So I think my electric rate in Baltimore was 6.3 or 6.7 cents per kilowatt hour.
Oh man.
Even now, I pay like 7.3
Hmm.
cents per kilowatt hour. I know you're closer to like 28 or 30.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a struggle up here in Maine, but you're in Pennsylvania right now, around the Philadelphia area, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So usually, I think as you get closer to those bigger cities, the electric rate gets a little bit better. I guess not in general. With like Boston, I think it's still pretty high, but like down in the New Jersey area, where it's kind of that there's more of that energy infrastructure. Um, but moving on from mining, I want to talk about Cardano because we're pretty heavily invested in the Cardano blockchain right now. We're running a enterprise grade stake pool. We're about to launch a governance token. We're even setting our sights on uh, writing some smart contracts and dApps. Why do we like Cardano so much, and why do we prefer it over so many other blockchains?
Um, I wouldn't say we necessarily prefer it, I guess. I just think it's undervalued, maybe in respect to um, like what it can do.
Hmm.
Like I guess it's underappreciated. Like it has a very robust proof of stake system, um, that doesn't require slashing or any locking of any kind.
Hmm.
Um,
That low barrier to entry.
yeah, so people can stake and have high liquidity. So it's really a no-brainer to stake on Cardano, which
Hmm.
helps with the network security because on a proof of stake network, unlike mining, so in a mining system, you need 51% of the hash power to attack the network. But in staking, you only need 51% of the active stake.
Hmm.
So if only half the network is staked, you only need 51% of that half, not 51% of the whole network. So
Right.
it's really important to create a system where um, the majority of coin holders are staking. And so Cardano has some of the highest staking participation out there. Um,
Well, it's so
but
accessible because of the delegation system and the non-custodial aspect. Whereas with Ethereum, you need to actually send your Cardano, or excuse me, send your Ethereum to an address to actually deposit it into the validator. With Cardano, you can delegate it from a wallet and still earn that interest while retaining complete control of your funds.
Yeah, so one of the differences with between Cardano and Ethereum in terms of staking is that to stake Ethereum, typically you have to give up access to your keys to stake, or use some kind of custodial service. You have to trust somebody else, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have access to the hardware that they're running on, so there's kind of a degree of risk there that isn't necessarily there with Cardano.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was another reason for choosing it.
Now, Solana has the same system where you can, the non custodial aspect where you can delegate from a wallet and not lose access to your funds. Um, Talk to us a little bit about why, like Solana versus Cardano, and why the decentralized aspect of Cardano is so much stronger than it is on Solana.
So Solana requires very expensive and kind of cutting edge a node,
Mm-hmm.
which in my opinion can be limiting in terms of um, like broad adoption, because the more cutting edge technology that's required, the more expensive these computers are to put together. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's important to keep a manageable um, like financial entry point for anybody to be able to participate um, in the on-chain inflationary rewards
Mm-hmm.
of each of these blockchain systems.
Absolutely. And just so the audience is clear on what we're talking about here, the barrier to entry for Cardano staking or creating a Cardano stake pool is so much lower than creating an Ethereum validator, an AVAX validator, a Solana validator. For Ethereum, AVAX, and Solana, it's, I believe, over $100,000 USD to create one of these things. So the barrier to entry is very high with those blockchains, but with Cardano, it only requires about 500 Cardano to start a stake pool. So basically anybody can do it. It's a way less, and the hardware required for those too. With Solana, you need, I believe it's like 64 gigabytes of RAM. You need like a Threadripper processor. With Cardano, you can do it with a couple Dell Optiplexes, um, and an old laptop as an air-gapped offline machine. So that's another reason why we like Cardano so much as compared to some of these other chains. So other than Cardano, what are some of the other cryptocurrencies that we're invested in, and what are some of our methods for generating returns for investors or stakeholders?
So obviously we've got some Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, some Monero.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in terms of generating yield, we do provide some liquidity on certain protocols. We do some lending, some DeFi lending.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, we don't, most of our assets are generating yield of some kind, whether it's staking or doing some kind of like financial thing on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm. So participating in the inflationary mechanisms of these blockchains, and with Cardano specifically doing that ourselves, kind of eliminating that middleman, creating the stake pool, running it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about our project with our governance token and what our thoughts are with that, because not only are we creating the stake pool and eliminating that middleman for our delegators, but we're also democratizing the stake pool and giving users a vote in the future of any protocol or changes that we make to the stake pool itself. So, could you talk to the audience a little bit about why we decided to do that with the stake pool, and what are our plans for the future of that?
Yeah, so with this token, we're trying to open up like the management of our stake pool, and kind of get our delegators involved in um, more of the process than just kind of picking a stake pool and kind of crossing your fingers and hoping it does well. So
Mm-hmm.
our delegators can vote on things like our pledge requirements. So pledge is important because the protocol rewards pools that have more pledge with more rewards. So delegators can basically vote on something like our pledge requirement, um, in a sense, paying them back in the future um, with more rewards through like this pledge mechanism that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically we plan to increase our pledge by reinvesting um, all of our fees until we meet the pledge requirements that are proposed by our delegators.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, rather than us having control over um, like our fees or when and where, like when we should upgrade our hardware, where we should be placing um, our relay nodes, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
we're like looking to kind of have our delegators play a role in some of these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess the hope is that, or the idea is that not everybody has the technical skill that maybe Jack or myself might have to operate a stake pool, um, but they might have other expertise in other areas that would help all of us have a successful stake pool.
Absolutely. So letting the delegators have a control or a vote over the future of our stake pool, any changes to the fees, fixed cost, margin, where our relay nodes are placed. Basically, anything can be proposed, and we'll take a look at that. And the token. Talk to us a little bit about the quadratic voting system and what your thoughts were with that, because we didn't want a Cardano whale to just come in and be able to take over complete control of our stake pool. We wanted to kind of break that up a little bit. So, talk to us a little bit about quadratic voting, um, the formulas that you used, and why you used them.
Yeah, so quadratic voting essentially means that um, as you gain more and more tokens, your voting power still increases, but at a decreasing rate.
Mm-hmm.
So um, instead of getting one vote per token or one vote per stake address, we kind of picked a middle ground, which is um, the square root of the number of tokens you have. Um, well, so the method that we implemented was the sum of the square root of um, voting tokens, like kind of per
Mm-hmm.
like voting option. So like whether it's yes or no or A, B, C, D, kind of taking the sum of the square roots of the number of tokens in each of these kind of buckets. And
Mm-hmm.
so what that does is um, it kind of gives us a middle ground between um, kind of a mob rule scenario where it's just we're just counting up the number of stake addresses, delegating to the pool, kind of just going with a kind of crude method that way. And then the other method is that someone with a lot of Cardano comes into the pool and just can um, basically like buy influence
Mm-hmm.
or complete influence or control over the pool. So basically, the sum of square root of square roots approach um, limits the ability of large delegators to control the outcome absolutely while also valuing the number of people that are participating in a vote. So let me try to think of an example. So let's say somebody has 10,000 governance tokens um, and they vote for option A. So the square root of 10,000 would be, so they have 100 votes on that one side. So I'm trying to think of, let's say, on the other side, to have an equal meaning there's a tie, you would need 10 people to put 100 governance tokens down. So that way, each of them would have 10 votes times 10 people, so 100. And so obviously there's 100 votes on both sides, so there's a tie. So you see how there's kind of a balance between whales and headcount in
Right.
kind of our voting system.
So just to be clear, 100,000 token or 100,000 Cardano delegated from one wallet has less influence than 100,000 or 100,000 Cardano delegated between 10 different wallets.
Wait, say that one more time.
So 100,000 tokens, if there's a large wallet of 100,000 tokens that is delegated to our pool, or 100,000 Cardano, excuse me, they receive less governance tokens than 100,000 Cardano spread between 10 wallets also delegated to our pool.
No, they would the amount of tokens you receive is just is separate from how we count votes. So we would rather, instead of one person voting with 100,000 governance tokens, we would rather see 10 people together voting with 100,000 governance tokens rather than just one.
I see. So the amount of tokens that are distributed doesn't matter based on like the how the wallets are spread out. It's when it actually comes to voting, it depends on where those votes come from.
Yeah. So when we pay out the token rewards, no matter how many ADA you have in the pool, like it'll always be like 40 ADA per 100 starting, and then kind of decaying to 38, 37, and so on, like from there. So it's not in terms of the rewards that you get paid out that your stake matters, or the quantity of tokens matters. It's when we're like trying to like make a proposal or submit some kind of change to the pool.
Gotcha. And what that allows us to do is we can track if like somebody's receiving a bunch of tokens and then sending them to multiple different wallets and trying to manipulate the vote that way to gain leverage. We can actually see those tokens being sent from like a whale's wallet per se into like 15 different wallets to try to like game the system a little bit. We can just track that on the blockchain and make sure that the vote isn't being manipulated. So that's really good. Just diverting away from Cardano for now, I want to talk about the future of GPU mining, proof of work versus proof of stake a little bit. A lot of my audience knows that I got started into cryptocurrency through GPU mining and tokenization, specifically on the Ravencoin blockchain. In one of my most recent videos, I laid out some of the issues that chain is having right now with regard to the centralization of the network hash rate. My solution to this is open source mining pools and longer term to build some sort of decentralized treasury on chain like Cardano has. Do you think there's hope for proof of work networks like Ravencoin? Do you think that proof of work will always have its place in crypto, or do you think that proof of stake will ultimately overtake it and make crypto mining obsolete?
I think there will always be a place for proof of work, because it's really just a matter of, can you find cheap enough electricity to make it worth mining something? And I think the answer will always be yes. It just might not be in Maine or in Pennsylvania, somewhere else with lower rates with more competitive electric rates. But like to a degree, some of that comes with like economies of scale and being able to kind of negotiate contracts for large sums of electricity. I don't see why proof of work necessarily has to go away.
Now, gotcha, and that makes sense. I'm in agreement with you on that. I think proof of work will always have its place in crypto. I did want to dive a little bit into proof of work versus proof of stake. What are some distinct differences between the two? And talk to us a little bit about the advantages that both have over one another. Because I think they're two distinct things. It's kind of like comparing apples to oranges in some ways. What advantages does proof of work have over proof of stake? and vice versa? What advantages does proof of stake have over proof of work?
So proof of work is um, secure in that it requires large sums of energy, and it's very hard or impossible to spontaneously not only find large sums of energy, but also ASIC hardware to try and attack the Bitcoin network. So, um, yeah, from that perspective, um, proof of work has a very strong security framework.
Hmm.
It's not susceptible to the same kinds of attacks that proof of stake is, in that in proof of stake, you have the possibility where there could be nothing at stake, where you have like a perfect example actually would be if you look at a lot of the Binance staking pools, like they
Hmm.
have nothing at stake or nearly nothing at stake,
They're
which is
ridiculous.
potentially, yeah, potential signs of civil behavior. So it's really not um, advantageous in that regard. So you can also there's like long and short range attacks, which is kind of why proof of stake blockchains have like checkpointing systems so that there's like a restore points on the blockchain um, to kind of prevent these kinds of attacks. But on proof of work, um, this isn't really necessary. You can't kind
Hmm.
of do um, these kind of long and short range attacks. But on the flip side, um, proof of stake is much more efficient. It doesn't require large sums of energy and instead requires quantities of tokens instead. Proof of stake, however, is um, faster. You can send more transactions on it. Um, there's more latency, I think, involved in proof of work blockchains um, than proof of stake. So, in terms of um, bandwidth, I think proof of stake might have the advantage.
In terms of development of like smart contracts and decentralized applications, is there any distinct advantages that proof of stake would have over proof of work, or is the same level of development able to be attained on a proof of work network? Or does it depend on the network?
Well, proof of stake and proof of work has no bearing on the applications that you can build on it.
Hmm.
Like whether Ethereum is proof of work or proof of stake doesn't impact the Ethereum virtual machine really in terms of what apps can run on top of it. Proof of whatever is just how the network has decided to come into agreement or reach consensus upon what transactions are valid and not valid.
Hmm.
So, um, like in that way, it could be proof of like anything,
Hmm.
and Ethereum could keep chugging away. That doesn't mean um, it would be as secure per se or as decentralized. Like if it was proof of authority, I probably wouldn't use it anymore. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't use your favorite app on it anymore. Like it would still function. Like it's a good example might be like the Binance Smart Chain. Like
Hmm.
it's like there's only a couple of validators on there, so but you can still run like Ethereum compatible apps on it.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Just pressing forward here. Um, for those who don't know, DeFi Strategies purchased a controlling stake in my company, Maine Blockchain, effective January 1st of 2022. Uh, Wanted to talk to you, David, a little bit about now. We've talked about the future of my company. Um, do you think that it's just going to be a stake pool company in the future? I know we're very specialized towards that right now. Or do we see that role expanding moving forward into something else? And what is that something else?
I think we'll always focus on like crypto oriented products and
Hmm.
services. Um, it'll be interesting to see how like the crypto asset management scene kind of evolves over the next like 5 to 20 years, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd like to think that we can evolve with the market and kind of help. kind of find like what the needs are, and so I think we'll expand to other chains. We are going to make sure that like our presence on these chains doesn't become like a centralizing force within them. So kind of like how we're only running one stake pool on Cardano. Um, we're going to try to provide support to the networks where possible in a way that's not kind of overbearing. Um, so we want to continue to kind of provide an on-ramp for maybe less technical crypto users, but also give those same users the opportunity to learn about the more technical sides of how these things work, how these blockchains function.
Sure, and something that you touched on was sort of this do no harm philosophy that we have when it comes to um, developing on chain, and the fact that we're only running one Cardano stake pool right now, and that we are committed to never running a second one. We're part of the Cardano Single Pool Alliance. Now, I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that. Why is that so important to us? That we're part of these type of organizations like the Single Pool Alliance, like the Cardano Bare Metal Alliance. Why is it so important that we are contributing to the decentralization of the blockchains that we're involved in?
Well, it's important for these networks to remain decentralized so that um, each network is more resilient against attacks from outside or inside forces.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the more decentralized the network is, the greater the number of minimum attack vectors there
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
to the network. So um, if let's say your minimum number of attack vectors is 25 groups, um, that means it would only take 25 groups to like basically have a controlling interest over the network,
Mm-hmm.
or like a 51% attack. But if you could get the number to like 50 or 100, then like you can see how it would be much more difficult to shut down like 50 geographically diversified groups or 100 geographically diversified groups and so on and so on. So I think with Cardano, ultimately, I would like to see that number get up to the k equals 500 number. But I mean, with the current state of multi-pool operators, I don't know, that's kind of off in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to kind of take this philosophy and then apply it to the other chains that we participate in, and hopefully we'll begin to connect with other like-minded people on other chains, kind of how we have with Cardano.
Absolutely, because in some ways, if we're harming the decentralization of the chain that we're participating in, we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, for lack of a better term, because we're harming the long-term viability of the network that we're invested in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, David, thank you for doing this. Just to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you about how excited you are to get this new PC that I just built, or that I'm in the process of building. We're still waiting on that backplate for the motherboard so I can finish it up. And what are you going to do with the PC once it's in your hands?
So a lot of work, a lot of maybe some nodes in the background, definitely some wallets, definitely lots of couple hundred Chrome tabs, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Got to get it use out of that 64 gigs of RAM.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll actually be able to fit my entire Steam library on my computer, I think, maybe for the first time in a couple years. Um, so yeah, I'll finally be able to get full use of that 3070 Ti.
Mm-hmm.
So currently I have a 1900X Threadripper. Um,
Eight
so
core,
yeah, this will
16
be,
threads, right?
yeah.
And what does it boost up to? The Threadripper?
So I have it overclocked to like 4.07 gigahertz, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a pretty decent overclock
That's
from what
decent.
I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, so not only is the um, frequency like 20% higher, but I'm sure there's a massive IPC uplift, which is instructions per clock. So not only is the clock speed faster, but my assumption is that this CPU is probably doing like 20 to 50% more work per cycle on top of the instructions per clock. So I'm sure it'll be great for Excel, maybe some editing, maybe some video games if I have time.
Well, you said with
Um,
Excel, your Excel sheets have been um, bogging up your current workstation, right?
yeah, periodically.
Hmm.
I used to work with like 7 and 8 megabyte Excel files, and they used to like start to break around there.
Hmm.
But I mean, at that point, maybe I shouldn't use Excel anymore for that stuff. Should get a
No,
database.
no, you had that's something that we're actually thinking about doing is trying to build a secure server between my location at my house here and yours, so that way we can file share directly through that secure channel and back up videos, data, that sort of thing. Um, One thing that I wanted to ask you about now, I'm putting that 4 terabyte Samsung SSD in that build. I think it's got like 530 read and 520 write speeds, I believe. So that's pretty solid read and write. But you were telling me that you have an NVMe that is like 10 times as fast that you're going to put into this machine. Um, what did you say the read and write speeds were on that NVMe?
So I've had a Samsung 970 Pro Evo NVMe SSD for like 4 years maybe, but the sequential read and write speed on that's like 3,500 megabytes per second.
Hmm. Oh my God. That is faster than
Um,
any computer I've ever used.
yeah, so that's like my boot drive. It's unfortunately it's only 500 gigabytes, but it gets the job done.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I'm sure there's faster stuff out there now, but it's hard to say if I wouldn't even notice a difference uh,
Yeah.
versus the performance I have. So I don't know. We'll see.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here for today. Again, David, I really appreciate you coming on. Is there any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience?
No, not for me.
All right. Well, thanks again. And if you guys want to check out our websites, DeFiStrategies.com, MaineBlockchain.com, our primary where we do most of our business. And if you like content like this, hit the like and subscribe button. Really appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you guys very, very soon. All right. Bye bye.
Yeah.